Hello and welcome back to Hacker Slacker. I'm your host Jacob Petticord, and my other host is
Andre Garive.
We've got a good week for you this week. First, some follow-up. Elon Musk is forced to step down as the chairman of Tesla in a settlement with the SEC, and that settlement comes along with a $20 million fine to him and a separate $20 million fine to the company. I personally feel like he made it out fairly clean on this one. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about this last week, and I believe I said this will take a couple years, or they'll settle right away. And
yeah, I think I literally said I don't think we'll know about this one next week, but I guess he did settle right away, so now we know.
Yeah, I'm honestly kind of shocked. Securities fraud is a pretty big thing, and a lot of people made a lot of bad financial decisions based off of that tweet that he had. So him just having to pay $20 million, which is chump change for him, and just stepping down. He is only stepping down as chairman of Tesla as well. So he's still the CEO of Tesla. So he basically just won't be in charge of the board.
Yeah, and he still gets to keep his shares, from what I understand, and he can't seek re-election for 3 years. But I'm pretty sure him and his partners own a majority stake in Tesla, so he could easily get his chairman position back in 3 years.
Absolutely.
The other thing about this settlement is that it doesn't prove that he's innocent or guilty, so there could still be a lot of follow-up lawsuits from people who made trades based on his tweet. So this probably isn't the end of this story, but it's the end of the SEC suing him. I mean, 2018 has definitely been a heck of a year for the guy. Like, it's been a total roller coaster. He's definitely been in the spotlight more than he ever has, but with this last news of him getting to remain as the CEO, the stock price for Tesla actually went up, which was interesting. It seems like maybe the investors are still happy with him running the ship, and that's probably where a lot of the stock's value comes from, is still his ability to innovate and disrupt the electric car industry.
For sure. One of the things that was kind of interesting about the whole fact that there was a settlement in a lawsuit was that we got to see that in certain aspects of this whole funding secured tweet, people didn't completely believe him, and he did admit later that the funding wasn't secured, which is why he got sued. But then he had also said he rounded up to $420 from $419, which is the actual figure he got, to impress his girlfriend Grimes.
I remember seeing that. I think that's one of probably the best quotes of 2018 is him admitting that he rounded up from $419 to $420 to make a weed joke for his girlfriend, who he's no longer dating.
Yeah, that's
that is peak Elon Musk.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's get into the news.
Yeah, so for the news this week, the first one is Facebook had a massive hack this week, potentially breaching over 50 million accounts, the biggest breach in the company's history. Essentially, there was some applications that exposed parts of the Facebook application that exposed users' authentication codes that people were then able to capture and then gain access to their accounts, and then potentially from there access accounts that use Facebook to log in, like Spotify. And a lot of people were affected. People even said Mark Zuckerberg himself was probably affected, and it's just another hit in a huge series of blows to the company over the last year.
What's strange is I feel like not many people are actually talking about this. I know it was like a big story for a day. Oh, Facebook got hacked, but nobody really looked at the actual implications, because there are different implications for every hack that happens to every company. So companies like Chegg last week or the week before got hacked. So they immediately got out. They said, hey, we were hacked. You should change your password. And then they prompted everybody whose data had been leaked to change their password. And they haven't really been taken through the ringer. But Facebook just kind of said that they were hacked and may have given up 50 million passwords. And nobody's really done anything.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I never really heard about this story outside of the internet, which is crazy because, I mean, everyone I know has a Facebook, and 50 million accounts is like nothing to scuff at. So you would have thought that people would have been talking about this breach, but I don't know if it's just it never really got picked up by mainstream media as well, or if people just don't seem to care anymore, but I did not end up hearing about this much. I think the main consequence of this breach is now lawmakers have more to point to when they're talking about needing to regulate social media, which has been something that's been a huge theme this year, is certain senators and congressmen that are trying to bring government regulation into social media, whether that's for free speech or privacy reasons. That's been a big topic. They keep bringing these CEOs into Washington, D.C. and talking to them, and it seems like this is what we're marching towards, is potential government regulation on social media.
Yeah. And speaking of Washington, that leads us to our next story. The Trump administration is suing the state of California over their pretty tough net neutrality laws. Ajit Pai, the chairman of the FCC and the Department of Justice, run by Jeff Sessions, are working together to bring a suit against California in what they call an extreme and illegal state law attempting to frustrate federal policy.
Do you know the specifics of like what the law did or?
So I'm pretty sure that the law for California's net neutrality basically took it back to what the national law was under the Obama administration.
Yeah.
Where I don't remember if it was Title I or Title II, but it switched the service providers, the ISPs were switched back to a different set of regulations in the state of California. But the state of California has the sixth largest economy on Earth and also has pretty much every tech company.
Yeah.
So that essentially becomes federal law.
It's, yeah, definitely they're trying to subvert the federal law in this case, and obviously they're not having it in Washington.
Yeah. An interesting thing is this is one of the laws where no matter where you are on the political spectrum, most people agree that net neutrality is a pretty good thing. And especially people on the internet, because we use the internet,
Yeah.
we want the internet to be free. So really the only people who don't want net neutrality are ISPs and politicians who make money from those ISPs.
Yeah, I think the net neutrality crowd has quieted down over the last few years, but it was definitely like one of the biggest topics on the internet for a while was like saving net neutrality and that sort of
Yeah,
thing.
front page of Reddit all the time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so our last news story, Microsoft had an event this week. It was actually kind of underwhelming from what people were expecting, but basically what we got was black versions of all of their Surface products, and then Surface headphones, which are supposed to be Microsoft's. It looks like they're AirPod competitors. They're pretty integrated with Microsoft's devices, just like the AirPods are, except they're over-ear. They're wireless like the AirPods. They have Cortana built in, and they're also noise canceling. So it's an interesting implementation of noise canceling, where on one side you can twist for your music volume, twist the cup of the headphone, and on the other side you can twist for the noise canceling level, which I think is actually like pretty unique and not something that I've seen done in that way before. So it'll be interesting to see if they can replicate some of Apple's success with AirPods with these like super integrated headphones that they can sell alongside their devices.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to go stop by Best Buy or something and go check those out, because one of the things with AirPods is you can't control the volume, which really sucks. So that's
Yep.
my biggest complaint with AirPods, but I do use AirPods all the time. It's my most used audio device. I do have over-ear wireless headphones, but I just use them a lot less because the AirPods are so convenient. And you can just take an AirPod out and your music stops, your podcast stops, whatever. You can talk to somebody and then you put it right back in and it keeps playing. So I think having noise cancellation being able to be changed, as well as the volume to be able to be changed while it's just on your head, that's all you have to touch. That's really nice.
Yeah, I'm still hoping for new versions of AirPods before the end of the year, and there's been rumors of over-the-ear Apple headphones coming soon too, so we'll see what we get there.
Yeah.
The last thing that I had from the event was they had a new app called Your Phone on Windows 10, and what it does is it mirrors Android phone apps to Windows, so it allows you to do things like access your messages, Snapchat, social medias, and that kind of thing from your Windows 10 device. So you just kind of pair your Android phone with it. You're able to access a lot of the features of the devices, and it kind of helps them compete with iMessage in a way, because there's some third-party solutions to allow you to text from your Android device on your Windows machines, but now they have something that's built in.
Yeah, that's absolutely huge, because I know a lot of the third-party applications will end up having ads, or they'll cost, or you only have a set amount of messages you can send. So that's really good for them. Do you know if there's a certain Android you have to be past? Like, do you have to be past 7.0 or 8.0 to get it?
I didn't see the specifics on that, so we'll see what it's actually supported, but it also lets you see photos and notifications are also mirrored to your device, so really you're getting a lot of the advantages of being in the Apple ecosystem with that. So really, this event comes out looking like they're doing a lot of things to keep in step with Apple. Apple definitely has seen the success of their black version of their laptop line this year. Microsoft put out the black version of their laptop line. They put out the integrated headphones. They put out some features that makes it more competitive with Mac OS. So it was an interesting event for Microsoft. Not a lot of new interesting hardware announced, but a lot of quality of life features for Windows users.
Absolutely. Should be pretty interesting to see. All right, let's get into our main topic for the day. Back when I was in San Francisco at Disrupt, I went to a speaker session on investing outside of the Valley. I said on my podcast about, I believe it was the Discord founder, or Dara Khosrowshahi, one of those. I said I would be getting back. Unfortunately, I got sick. I wasn't able to record, and then we started this new sort of format that we're using. So our main topic today is going to be about that talk that I went to, investing outside the Valley, with J.D. Vance, who worked as a venture capitalist with Steve Case at Revolution Ventures. So they work together, and they're both well-respected people in the technological field. Steve Case was the head of AOL for a while, and J.D. Vance has written some very well-known books. So we'll just kind of get into this. So 75% of venture capital in 2017 went to 3 states: New York, California, and Massachusetts, which makes sense. You have LA, San Francisco, New York City, and Boston. 4 huge tech cities that are going to be really eating up venture capital. And I'm sure if you take out Massachusetts, it's not going to drop much below 60%. So investing outside of the Valley can be a really good opportunity as an investor and a technologist, but you kind of have to figure out the right way to do it. A lot of companies are actually leaving Silicon Valley because if you're a harder tech company, you're not some vague software application. You want to be close to your users. So we're at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. They actually did mention us in their speech. They said, if you're having an agricultural technology company, put it in Lincoln, Nebraska. You have ag, you have a university, you have tech. That's where you want to be. And that's the kind of company that you want to invest in. Basically, you want to figure out how you can guarantee a return in a company that's outside the Bay. Because you can invest all you want in the Bay, but you're not going to get that explosive return. Whereas if you invest in a company outside of the Bay and they have even marginal success, you invested much less money because of the location, so your returns will be greater.
Yeah, Steve Case has definitely been a major, I don't really like using this word, but he's been a major thought leader in terms of investing outside the Valley and in the Midwest. I remember him getting some buzz a few years ago for this fund that they were starting, that Revolution was starting, called the Rise of the Rest Fund, where him and a bunch of other investors, I think maybe Warren Buffett, were getting on a bus and traveling around the Midwest, talking to companies locally. They were in Lincoln or maybe it was Omaha last year. I think it was definitely crazy hearing the buzz about all that. So I think a lot of it has to do with the talent. So when you're talking about ag tech companies, there's a lot of ag talent in Nebraska, so that's why it makes sense for them to be here. And on top of that, all of these cities are pushing to have their own sort of mini Silicon Valley. So we have there's probably I think there's 5 startup accelerators between Lincoln and Omaha, and a couple of them are pretty decent sized. And then in Lincoln at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, we have the RAKES program, which is about entrepreneurship partly, and then there's also the Angler program, which is about ag tech entrepreneurship specifically. So I think one of the things that a lot of these cities can do is find what they specialize in. So for Lincoln, a lot of that's going to end up being ag, and then really try to capitalize on that and attract investors because you are the place to go for ag technology companies.
Yeah, so one of the big things is that you need to grow the city in order for the company to really truly blow up. If you look at Seattle, you have Microsoft and Amazon who completely changed the entire DNA of that city just by being in that city and being so big. So you need to have schools and infrastructure and broadband, and you need all of these things in order to grow a big city into a great city. So you look at companies in cities like Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Ann Arbor, Madison, Omaha, St. Louis, Kansas City, all of these Midwestern cities that are ready and primed to be taken over by tech companies that specialize in things that they're close to.
Yeah, definitely. So, what were some of the other big things that Vance and Case hit in their talk?
One of the things that they talked about is where talent goes, because talent goes to the Valley because the Valley has the most opportunity.
Yep.
But what they're trying to do is they're trying to change that and have opportunities available for people elsewhere. So if you are a software developer, let's say you go to Purdue, Big Ten school, it's a major university, you get a great degree in engineering, and then you say, oh shoot, now I have to go to the Bay. Maybe you don't want to go to the Bay. Maybe you have family in Indiana. What if you want to work in Indianapolis? What they want to do is they want companies in Indianapolis to be able to get that top talent out of the places that they're close to. So one of the things with investing in companies is you want companies that are going to draw their local talent and maybe even talent out of the Bay. Because once you can start doing that, it kind of creates a diaspora of tech talent that
Diaspora. You're gonna have to explain that word. That's a new one to me.
it's basically a dispersion of any people from their original homeland is the Google definition of that
Okay.
word. So yeah, we need this. We need all of this talent to not be concentrated in the Bay for Bay companies to be able to kind of relieve the pressure on needing growth and needing certain things, and then also the brain drain that happens on cities outside of the Bay.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a pattern that I've observed. So, like, when we're talking to people at career fairs or just people at companies in general, a lot of the high achieving people, you hear that they went out to Microsoft or they went out to San Francisco to work at a startup for a while, and then they came back to Midwest because they're a Midwest person and that's where they feel like they belong. But right out of college, their first thought was, oh, I'm going to go out to these top tech cities because that's where the salaries are, that's where the excitement is. And I know personally I'm super tempted by that, and it's just because a lot of the companies can't deliver the same kind of exciting narrative that the companies can out there. I mean, I know that's something that you buy into too.
Absolutely. I spent my last summer out in the Bay and I absolutely loved it. I'm going back to either the Bay or New York or Seattle. I'm looking at these big tech cities, and that's where I'll be spending next summer too. So
Yeah, so what would Omaha and Lincoln need to do to keep you here?
I think they would need to match the pay and the perks. I don't know what companies out of Omaha would be willing to pay, but as long as it's good pay. But one of the things is really the perks of being in the Bay, and that's a lot of those are intangible because they don't come straight from the companies. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy that you go to the Bay to be at a big company and meet other talented people who are in the Bay, which puts you back in the Bay,
Yeah.
and brings more people to the Bay so they can meet the people that are in the Bay.
Yeah, that's just, it's tough to break that cycle. I mean, they can talk about how companies need to work on getting their local talent not to leave, but I mean, there's not really much that they can do to compete with these like mega cities like Boston and San Francisco and New York.
Absolutely. And I think it really does start with the city. I think there are, if you look at cities like Austin, Texas should not be a city that tech is thriving in. Austin, Texas is very hot. I know that from experience, and
Yeah.
it is in the middle of Texas. It's not really close to anything. It's big, and it has a lot of tech companies, and that's because the city has really worked hard to make it a great place for young people to live, because a lot of this tech talent is young.
They also have, I mean, the University of Texas, which is a great producer of tech talent.
Yeah.
So a lot of it comes from the college too.
Yeah. So last year we both went to a speech, or a talk rather, by North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum,
Yep.
who told us that if you want your cities to grow, you need cities to be conducive to tech companies creating a culture there. So you need great downtown areas. You need very nice housing for a lot of people. You need good school systems, because if you don't have those, then people aren't going to want to stay there. So that kind of matched up with what Vance and Case were saying, how you need the schools, you need the infrastructure, you need the broadband speeds in order to get your city to grow. And it's going to take a lot of investment, but it's going to take investment of the city before they can get the investment from those VCs that are coming from the Bay to actually take their money out of the Bay and put it into one of these burgeoning cities.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a perceived like crowding in the Bay, but I mean, there's so much money there, and it's definitely hard to make the case that all of these VCs are struggling to make a living there. You know, like there's enough companies for everybody to invest in. So it'll be interesting to see how companies or how cities more like it can attract these VCs to come out and spend more monies in their cities and attract the talent and to retain the talent that they have. I mean, it's all just one big cycle that's tough to kind of get rolling in the right direction. But there's some cities that people can look to, for example. I feel like Kansas City's been doing good in this recently. We don't really have a big tech college, but we've definitely seen like a huge revival in our downtown. We got Google Fiber, which you were talking about broadband internet. I mean, everyone was so excited when that came. We thought all these companies are going to come for this fast internet and revive downtown. So hopefully we're on the up and up there. Lincoln's definitely seen better nightlife downtown, but again, a lot of it stems from the school. So it's definitely tough for these cities to kind of reverse the cycle in a way.
Absolutely. And I just visited Kansas City last month. I'm not from Kansas City, so I've only visited, but I've visited quite a bit. And it has definitely evolved, and it seems like a place I would actually enjoy living in if I were in the Midwest. You're wearing a Sporting KC shirt right now. I went to a Sporting KC match. It was a ton of fun, and I realized, wow, this is actually a really cool city. With like an MLS team, an MLB team, an NFL team, they've got sports.
Yeah, the Royals the Chiefs just had a heck of a game on Monday. That was super fun to watch.
They're 4-0 right now, and they're just fun to watch. They've got good sports. It's
been exciting.
They've got nice Midwestern people that I'm used to growing up here in Nebraska. What's interesting is that 75% of Fortune 500 companies are in the middle of the country. So these VCs need to just back out of the valley. Not completely, but some of them need to see all the opportunity in the Midwest and maybe even the Southeast, because there's not that many companies outside of maybe Atlanta and Miami down there. So you got to look at all these other cities that exist and have thriving industries, but just don't have huge tech numbers.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely VCs that are seeing this opportunity, like Case on the Rise of the Rest Fund. So it'll be interesting to see over the next 5 to 10 years if we see any real like meaningful change and where a lot of this money is going.
Yeah, a quote from the talk I went to was, "It's hard to make a difference as a single entrepreneur in Silicon Valley because there are so many. You're not going to be, maybe you will be. There's a very low chance you're going to be the next Zuckerberg or the next Bezos."
And even if you are, I mean, there's still Google and a bunch of other big companies right around you. So you can still be the Zuckerberg, and people are still talking about Google and Apple out there. So
exactly.
It's tough.
It's hard to be the top dog because you're in the biggest pond. But if you say you're here in Lincoln, or if you're in Denver, maybe you're in Phoenix or Minneapolis. Those are cities where if you really blow up, you actually transform the city with you. You don't have to conform your company to the city you're in.
Yeah, we have a great example of that here, actually. I mean, the Huddle founders that graduated from the Rake School that we go to, they're by no means like the most successful entrepreneurs by a long shot. They have a decently successful business that's growing very rapidly, and it's doing really well for itself, but it's nothing like Google or Facebook, and they've totally transformed Lincoln with all the tech talent that they're employing. They're building downtown. It's like a beacon of entrepreneurship and new technology for the city.
Absolutely. They get a lot of investments from inside the city because people love them. Huddle, I actually worked at their new building for an internship for a different company this past spring. That building is super nice, and it's got this great view of downtown. It's right across from the basketball arena where the college basketball games happen. It's a really great place to work, which is kind of hard to find in some places in the Midwest.
Yeah, and I know that's like a really local example, and a lot of people listening outside Lincoln won't understand it, but it's definitely, I feel like there's an opportunity for Huddles to be in other smaller cities. You know, if some founder decides not to start their company in Silicon Valley and instead starts it in the city that they're from, they can look to Huddle to see like the major impact that they can have on that city if they decide to stay.
Yeah. So I'm actually seeing a report here that Huddle's at about $500 million valuation, which for a company just out of Lincoln, Nebraska is gigantic. They have offices in New York. They have offices in London and Sydney.
Yep, Boston.
So there are really great opportunities to start and have headquarters for a tech company in one of these cities. And then maybe if you're the CEO, you put a building in the city that you really love and you spend most of your time there. But
I know that's what a few of them are doing.
yeah. So, I mean, if you want to invest in a company in Columbus, Missouri, do it. Maybe not that small of a place, but if you want one of these Midwestern cities between 500,000 and 2 million people, it's a great place to be investing your money.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing for VCs to be aware of.
Are there any like super interesting companies that you know of that are in very non-traditional tech cities?
I mean, thinking back to Kansas City, we have a few like interesting tech companies, but nothing crazy that would blow you out of the water. I feel like Huddle would here. I feel like there might not even be anything on Huddle scale. But then there's just still like a bunch of small companies that you would never have heard of that are actually doing like really cool stuff. Like we had him on the show. Nick Sisko worked at Payit, for example. That's a company that probably nobody in Kansas City has heard of, but is like a total Silicon Valley style small team doing really cool things. And there's probably a dozen or so more of them that people just don't know a lot about.
One of the things that is really interesting is that these cities really do get transformed. Austin and Seattle are, in my opinion, two of the cities that have been transformed the most by tech companies. I don't even know if Austin was all tech companies, but it has become a gigantic tech city. It's probably one of the front runners behind maybe Washington, D.C. for Amazon's HQ too.
Yeah.
So I know there are just tons of companies either moving there or setting up offices there. There's a company here in Lincoln, Spreetail, that just created their first out-of-state office in Austin, Texas, because it's really just a great city to be in.
Yeah, Austin's definitely one of the cities that's on the rise, so it'll be interesting to see kind of what the next big city after that is. And I'm not as in touch as I should be with a lot of this Midwest Silicon Prairie stuff, so I'm sure that there's some city that a lot of people are talking about that I'm not super aware of.
Yeah, if you had to take your best guess right now that of a city in 5 years that everybody will be talking about, what would you guess?
If you want to look at a town similar to Austin, Austin's a pretty decent sized town, so that would rule out like your Ann Arbors and Lincoln and a bunch of other places. I want to say, I feel like Atlanta's already pretty big. I don't really
Atlanta
have a good...
is a pretty well off. They are a large city as well. So
Atlanta's huge. So
but
I feel
most
like
of
that's
their
a little
industry
unfair.
is in flight, and now there's quite a bit of film industry in Atlanta, which is kind of interesting.
I know there's a few large tech companies that are headquartered in Atlanta, but
Yeah.
I don't know if I would consider them a top tech city, but I could see them developing into one.
Yeah. I've looked at cities like Washington, D.C., Denver, and Miami.
Oh, Denver could be a huge one.
And those are
yeah.
three cities that I think, wow, these are on the edge of becoming just massively important tech cities, especially Denver. Denver is in Colorado, so it's very close to the middle of the country, yet somehow has the culture of San Francisco already. So I would not be surprised to see a lot of talent from the Bay and even the Pacific Northwest and the Midwest to just kind of flock to Denver.
Yeah, I feel like Denver already has that culture going for it, that kind of the startup hipstery vibe. So
Yeah.
I can definitely see Denver being a big up and coming place.
That's a lot like what Austin was maybe 20 years ago. All right. So that was Investing Outside the Valley with JD Vance and Steve Case of Revolution Ventures. Anything else you've got, Jacob?
No, I think that's all. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.
See you next week. And one quick shout out, thanks to Ben Stewart for the great jingle you heard at the beginning and end of this episode.
Oh yeah, thanks, Ben.